Winchester University of Winchester Business School. She has been holding quite some questions and has been on a transformative journey herself. And you're very welcome, Karen, today with us here. Very grateful that you have joined us. Next, Armand, our incredible guardian of the GRLI. He has been involved for the past couple of years, a senior lecturer at Stellenbosch Business School, and also head of a social impact. Is it an institute, social impact institute, or a hub at the Stellenbosch University? Armand?
It's a portfolio, but it might as well be an institution.
I would say that. Thank you. And last but not least, Sarah Elliott Spencer is also another beautiful human being. She's the head of Think Like a Tree, Think Like a Forest, and it's coming also bringing a little bit different perspective to this conversation. And I'm very happy to hand over to Chris and Lana to take us into the kind of the format and how today's session is gonna unfold. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Daria. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Maybe if we just take a moment just to kind of have a look around the screen and recognize everybody who's here. I see a lot of familiar faces. It's nice to see people coming back again. Yeah, so here we are for the final of 3 crucial conversations for this this term, if you like, and we've been discussing 3 themes that arose out of the GRLI and its wider network, and how those themes relate to each other. And they are the meta crisis, so the kind of social, political, environmental crisis that we're in at a global level, power and how power operates within the world and within the crisis, and systemic transformation, what might be needed, what that might mean, how transformation and crisis and power play off each other. And we've had several conversations about that. And what we'd like to do today is to try and start the conversation in a slightly different way. So we've asked each of our 3 conversation starters to bring a question. So instead of bringing a statement or bringing information or bringing their perspectives and views on things, to come with a question. So what is it that they don't know? We've had several sessions of what people do know. And we thought, okay, let's go to the edge. Let's go to the brink. Let's go to the places where we're uncertain, and just see whether that opens the dialogue in a different way. So our encouragement is that we'll have roughly 20 minutes from our conversation starters, and then we'll move into a breakout room. So our encouragement is, as you enter into the breakout room, to bring whatever question you have as well, question or questions. So what is it that you're curious about? What is it that you're stumped, bewildered, bamboozled about? What is it that is really taxing your brain at the minute? So the encouragement is to go to the edge, to the uncertain, to the unfamiliar. So with that, I'll just quickly remind us all about the format. So the format is, we have 3 conversation starters. They're going to start with their questions. They're going to have a conversation between them. After about 20 minutes, at roughly half past the hour, we'll move into breakout rooms, and the conversation starters will come into the breakout rooms with us, and we'll carry on the conversation there. We'll share our own questions, our reflections on what we've heard. Again, that'll be for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll come back together, and Lana will then hold the session when we come back together as a plenary to share reflections and to deepen our questions about these 3 topics. Does that sound okay with everyone? Good. A few nods and thumbs up are great. Okay, in which case, so the order in which I can see people are Karen first, and then Armand, and then Sarah. So maybe we can go in that order. Oh, great. Oh, the tech's working fab. So So Karen,
Yes.
do you want to share a question with us about this trio of interrelated topics?
Yes. I was really pleased when you asked us to bring a question. We did have a pre-discussion, didn't we? And the question that I think has been with me for decades, and I still don't know the answer, if there is an answer at all, is how do we get emotionally and spiritually mature people into positions of senior leadership within organizations, with our most powerful institutions on a sustainable basis? So that is the question. As a coach and as an academic and as a researcher, I've been grappling with for decades and decades. And it does touch on the issues of power very, very definitely, and systemic change. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Great place to start. Armand, where can you take us next?
Oh, I'm going to take you very deep. And you said it's got to be something that you can't figure out. And so it's a deep question, and I'm not sure I'm going to do it justice without shaping the context, but maybe that comes out through the conversation. But I think it's rather relevant when we look at what's happening within my local context and then globally. And so the question for me is, why and how is it that white supremacist thinking continues to prevail? And that's the deep question. As we get into the conversation, I'll probably share the context and why it is that continues to be a burning question for me.
And it feels like a question that is relevant in a number of parts of the world, if not for the world overall right now. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Wow. Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, very excited about these huge questions. So mine is around how can we create the conditions to help empower the innate potential in all human beings to create a positive future. So maybe it cuts again, it definitely cuts across the three themes of meta crisis. The sense of urgency that it needs everyone to be showing up. Also power, because there's huge issues around disempowerment in terms of, why are people not engaging in the way that is the conditions demand. And then of course systemic transformation, that it's all of our systems and processes that need to change. So I tend to operate on the level of mindset shift, paradigm shift, so it's big shifts that we're needing now, rather than any kind of tinkering with issues like sustainability. We need big systemic paradigm shifts.
Wow, thank you. So a couple of questions about how. So how do we release innate human potential? How do we get emotionally and spiritually mature people into positions where they can make decisions? And then something about a big blockage or barrier to that in the form of white supremacist kind of thinking and practice. So I'm going to kind of step back now and let the three of you just dive into that wherever feels like a starting point.
So maybe I can jump in here because, and to Sarah's framing, Sarah, do you believe that everybody understands what the common issues are, and that there is this innate drive or sense towards some sort of a common good?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more nuanced than that, because the idea of good is one that when we take a regenerative approach, we question this concept of good, because good tends to be, dictated by humans rather than by what we see in evolutionary history across the rest of the living world. So, you know, the regenerative nature inspired approach would tend towards seeing that living beings have a tendency in ecosystems to create life and create conditions conducive for more life to thrive. And actually it's humans that have deviated from that general trend, and we've deviated for certain reasons around power, around mindset, around some philosophies that are plain wrong. And therefore going, you know, looking to 3.8 billion years of evolutionary history, that tends to suggest that there is another way. And that's kind of what I sort of support people to kind of get back on that more regenerative track. And the one thing that is really interesting is it doesn't need everyone, actually, you know, because it is innately in us. If we change the systems of power and we change some of the, you know, key operating systems that we're looking around, then that shifts, really big shifts can happen.
Can I respond a bit, Armand, to your question as well? Because I think I'm coming from a slightly different perspective from Sarah, which is always useful. I follow Professor Jim Stanius's work from Harvard University, and he writes a lot about social dominance orientation. I find that a really powerful construct, that some people are high in social dominance orientation, and think Donald Trump, shorthand, okay? People who really seriously want power for the sake of power, who seek to be at the top of hierarchy, enhancing it, i.e. powerful institutions, in order to promote their own egoic interests, their desire for power, their desire for wealth, their desire for esteem. And, you know, in my own career as a coach and also working within organizations and universities also, I've seen these people, and I suspect that probably everybody has, actually. And these people tend to get to the tops of the most powerful institutions in the world, whether that be the UN or whether it be, I don't know, Meta or Tesla or whatever, because they have a number of things going for them, which is a desire for power. They have very strong instincts for power. They know how to play the power game. They are ruthless, and they play all sorts of power tactics, which other people who are perhaps less motivated by power don't even see, don't understand, and don't play. So there's a game going on here. And I think that many of us are unaware of it. And many, certainly the coachees that I coach, senior leaders who often end up asking, why did that person get promoted over me? You know, he or she is a bully or whatever. They don't understand this idea that we are playing a game and people want power and they will do anything to get it.
And so maybe, Corinne, if I can ask you, I mean, I also witnessed this. It seems to be the loudest, the roughest who get to the top. But I also too desire power. Is it not an issue of the perversion of that power in some ways that gets us a Donald Trump or otherwise? What are your thoughts on that? Because I desire power too.
Great, which is fantastic. So McLennan, way back in the sort of 60s, looked at our motivations, and he looked at the desire for affiliation, the desire for achievement, and the desire for power. And what he found was that people who got to the tops of the organizations were high in desire for power, medium in desire for achievement, and very low in desire for affiliation. And I would add to that mix a desire for security. So if you imagine all of us in the mix, we have a desire for security, for power, for achievement, and also to be, you know, liked and to be popular, then how can we ensure that the people who have a decent mixture of power orientation, you have to have it, you know, I don't have it. So I am in awe of people who desire power, but also rooted in a desire for achievement and a moral purpose. So that they're not serving their own ego needs, particularly, although I think it's impossible not to serve them to a certain extent, but they see a higher purpose and they are serving that higher purpose, they are serving their community. And I don't think we get enough of those kinds of people in the top positions of power. There's nothing wrong with a desire for power per se, absolutely nothing.
I think you sort of spell it out nicely, right? I don't have the inclinations of Donald Trump, but I do seek to have that balance in my life.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that I do with the power that I have? How do I utilize that in a positive way?
And can I add that quickly, Armand, that when we get into power, we know that that affects our brain chemistry, so that we know that we get higher levels of testosterone and our oxytocin, which is the love bonding relational chemical, or hormone rather, goes down. So there's a degree here of also self-management that is needed, that when we get into positions of power, so that that hubris and arrogance doesn't take over, that testosterone, as it were.
There is, for any one person like that, you know, Donald Trump, to actually be in a position where they can wield so much power, there are so many other systemic factors that need to reinforce that. And within organizations, obviously, you know, having profit as the prime motive, then that, of course, then reinforces that. I mean, Jeremy Lentz did a course with him a couple of years ago, and he talks about, you know, if organizations were people, they would be psychopaths, because there is there is no need for empathy. In fact, you need to not have empathy if you've got profit as your sole motive. So therefore, the systems that are in place, and there's a lovely story as well about and I don't know the validity of this, but it is an interesting sort of pondering that actually in many ancient civilizations, there were checks and balances to that power of ego. And there's this great story about hunters who were often kind of younger, fitter men, maybe coming into teenage years, and they would sharpen arrowheads. And everybody in the tribe would sharpen an arrowhead and give it to the hunter. And when they came back, it was the person who'd made the arrowhead that got the praise and the glory, not the hunter. And it was a really good sort of check and balance to that ego, that, you know, that person, if we're constantly rallying around them saying, yes, you're so great, you know, whether that be now in modern days, the media, or the ways that organizations are organized, then it's not really surprising that those people then rise up. So I feel like there's lots of systemic changes that are needed so that the right people do rise, and that necessitates changing the purpose of organizations to a certain, to a large degree.
And what are your views on your questions? Because you must have some responses to it, some initial ideas.
Yeah. The reason that I've asked that question, and it's not necessarily just what's happening across the globe. We see what's happening in Palestine, Israel. We see what's happening in the US. But having grown up in South Africa through apartheid, we're now what people would like to say post-apartheid, right? Into our democracy. We have a generation of young white people who were, or a generation that were born free, that I've now noticed in my classrooms are they're reluctant to get to grips with the history and the understanding of what's transpired in the past, and are far more willing to say, well, it was not us, it was our parents. And so what that brings in is, this questioning for me, I'm like, how is it that you're not willing to engage with that past? Not for any other reason than to actually have a deeper understanding of what it means then to seek social justice and equality in a social, environmental, and economic sense, right? And so I stand there in the classroom as what Alverson and Myson would have called a tempered radical. I'm seeing what's happening within my institution. I see what the culture is. There's some aspects of my personal values which are, conflicted with it, and I'm trying to change this from within, right? So I'm sitting with this particular issue, but the more I'm working at this, the more it seems like it's just growing to be acceptable that power can be used in the manner that it is being used. That something as fickle as skin color has such, it can be hurtful. So that's what prompted my thinking, and it's really in the last 2 or 3 weeks after coming out of a teaching block, where the feedback was, "Oh, this was really great. We were able to traverse such deep issues," and then on the same side, I get like, "Oh, why are we talking about these things? He's got an agenda," and well, I'd hope everybody would have an agenda for balancing out, right? I hope that would be the agenda. But what's worrying me is that we seek to move on too quickly without putting down the proper foundations, without understanding what the real issues are. So whether it's environmental, whether it's within that ecosystem framework, looking at it, do we all actually understand what we're trying to achieve as a collective, as human beings? Where's our humanity gone? I mean, that's disturbing. We're so easily willing to destroy the natural environment rather than think about, sustainability in a very different way. We're guilty of it in business too, right? We create the tick boxes, we teach these things in the classrooms, we see it being applied, but we silently move on. So it's this thing about Donald Trump doesn't elect himself. The masses do. What's happening there? That people are thinking this is okay and it's good for them. It's their country, it's their democracy. They can choose who they choose. But some of the things are rather shocking. He's not the only one. I think there are many leaders across the globe, in my country, black, white, all shapes and sizes, that you just wonder, do they have humanity's interest at heart? Do they have this planet's interest at heart? And I am maybe very pessimistic and sound like it now, but that's what's really my question. What do we need to do to change this? And to say this thing, I think issues, I think systemically they are just barriers that we have to overcome.
You're triggering so many responses in me, Armand. I'll try and be quick and then I'll pass on to Sarah. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So firstly, I was reading some psychology experiments before I came online, just to remind myself. Do you remember, I don't know if people know the blue-eye, brown eye experiment, where a teacher basically tells the blue-eyed people they're superior, they're only kids, and the brown eyes that they're inferior, and it takes a day before the blue eyes are bullying and being cruel to brown-eyed kids. Then there's the robber gang as well, where Sharif takes 2 lots of boys and makes them form sort of group identities, and then makes them compete. And then they start hating each other, attacking each other, being very, very aggressive. We are territorial animals, and I think that one of the things that we need to recognize is that one thing that Sharif changed to make the boys more aggressive towards each other is he limited the resources. And so that when we get that very toxic combination of limited resources, a feeling of, we're losing out here, jobs are scarce, money is scarce, that's when we become tribal. And it's instinctive inside us. It's almost like we can't help it, they're Democrats, we're Republicans, I'm Labour, they're Conservative, they're boys, we're women. Whatever it will be, whatever that identification will be, it's an instinctive response to fear, basically. And so one way he managed to get the boys to collaborate was to create a superordinate goal that they all had to cooperate with in order to achieve. So they needed to get some water, for example, so they had to cooperate. You would have thought that saving the planet might be a superordinate goal, but it isn't. I don't know what a superordinate goal is that will bring people together. But we have to recognize that we are tribal and we identify with our groups, and we very easily label and vilify people who we see as different to us. And that's a natural, normal human instinct. So we're sort of working against the grain here. Yeah, Sarah, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to disagree about the innateness of our tribalism. Actually, I think that a lot of that is actually learnt rather than, you know, basically instinctual. But I think, you know, taking the ecosystem approach that is obviously part of this regenerative approach, valuing diversity is something that we see across the healthy ecosystems. So, you know, you don't get nature separating everything out into silos. Everything's mixed up. There is health, resilience, adaptability in diversity. And yet humans have gone down quite a different route, that we like monocultures in our agriculture. We like, you know, we like separating out our children from our old people, and we put them in different places, and never the twain shall meet, you know. And what I find when I take groups of leaders out into the forest is that this kind of idea of valuing diversity it kind of is like an aha moment, but it's also like, yeah, kind of, I already knew that somehow deep inside me. It's a remembering that actually that diversity is strength. And so I think, you know, the more we can have of that, and the more we can see diversity as healthy and resilient, and the less we can see the tick boxes of let's meet the laws and regulations around diversity, you know, as a concept within business. I mean, I'm not anti that at all, but just putting it in its context, that it tends to be a very reductionist way rather than an expansive and hopeful way of looking at the issue around diversity. So that sort of shift in perspective can be, you know, really valuable in seeing the diversity. It can also welcome in the diversity of ideas and perspectives that is actually really rich for our innovation and creativity in business, for example. So it's not, you know, it's not about kind of labeling people as in their difference. It's more about the richness of diversity, and also valuing the uniqueness of every individual and in their complexity and wholeness as well.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in here. Just because of time. And I'm gonna ask John, are you in charge of the tech, to set us up with some breakout groups here? I just want, and as we move into those breakout rooms, I just want to thank the three of you for an incredibly rich soup that you've created for us to dine on now in our breakout rooms. I had loads in there about are we seeking to move on too quickly? And it made me think about, well, how does intergenerational change happen? Not just systemic change, but intergenerational change. And then lots about, you know, the role of conditions, social conditions and organizational structures in creating power and divisiveness and competition, and how much of that is innate and how much of that is socially constructed and organizationally constructed. and what conditions help us to collaborate and to value diversity, and what conditions push us into competitiveness and kind of towards monoculture and so on. So loads and loads in there that was incredibly rich. So I guess we'll carry on this conversation in the breakout groups. I'm wondering if you've all kind of been triggered into thinking of a question that you've got that you can take in and share. And we'll stay for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and just hear some reflections. John, are you wanting to say something?
No, I'm nearly there. I just want to make sure that we've got our rooms set up. Okay. I'm gonna open the rooms. How long am I opening the rooms for?
20 minutes.
Okay, fine. 20 minutes.
And thanks again to the three of you. Incredibly rich.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
See you soon. Okay.
People all around the world is next. It's so
No need to whisper.
I can imagine you left with a sense of that was not enough. Just scratching the surface here. I would like for us to all take the time to just take a pause from what we've just heard and centering ourselves, especially our heart space, of all the messages that you've received for today. What is the most important for you to take in and to share? So just giving a moment of pause and feeling through your heart out of everything that has been heard and shared. What is that, like one idea, one impulse, one signal that that you really felt strongly called to process and integrate and bring out some more? And when you have that message really coming through for you, I invite you to voice it out in the chat so that we have a collective awareness of where your heart space is. Because in this harvesting, it's oftentimes, we do not get to hear each other out. So feel free to put in the chat what has resonated so deeply with you that you would like to share in this moment. Now I would like to invite voices to share what what did you hear in your breakouts? What stood out? And are there even further questions that you would like to put in our center that we can all, in Filipino, we have this himay, which is really like you're filleting it to the smallest part. So are there those, in your conversation questions that stood up for you that you're like, oh, would be nice to bring it back here in our center? Anyone who would like to share? Chris, would you want to start us off? How was it in your breakout?
How was it? I think we talked some about hierarchy and what is there in nature that is hierarchical, and is that different from the hierarchies that we've adopted in as humanity? We talked some about those of us who don't particularly like or operate well in hierarchies because we're not high in this social dominance. Like, what are the forms that we gravitate towards? And then we talked about what brings us together, what and the fact that there is more that unites us than divides us. So those were kind of themes that came up, I think.
Yeah, Chris. Anyone else who would like to share?
I'll say from our group, we started with the two sides of the coin, perhaps, to say that maybe we have a lot of social conditions that are different. Anders in my group was talking about the difference in social security and safety net and those kinds of conditions, where he is vis-a-vis the U.S., where it's much more unstable. I said in a different way that I thought we had things that were much more similar because I've been traveling in Western Europe. But I think the two things I would take from our conversation is what I really liked, that I think that was what Sarah said, is what's mine to do. So, you can think deeply about all the different challenges, but what's my part? So there's not an answer, but there's, understanding where I belong in this time. And then, one of the things that Anders brought up also was about the role of power in these systems. And so while we talk about belonging and community organizing and visioning for a new world, there are real power structures here that have that are the result of the system that we built in part at business schools. We built the business schools, and that are not ceding power, at least as far as I can tell.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
If I can group, I could speak for our group of Peter and Armand and Kathy and me, because I hear links. I hope you all hear them as well. I think probably the number one emphasis came out as the sense of belonging, but what is in the way, if you will, of belonging. And there's fear, there's the lack of security that promotes defensiveness or protection of one's livelihood and taking care of family and so on. So when we talk conditions, that's kind of the environment in which belonging is not really promoted. And I think for me, if I add that personal perspective to it, is there's a frustration in finding what is that overarching purpose and intent. We're all in little pockets, and true, I'm in Texas in the US, and so talk about pockets of perspectives. so that what can we do, or what is mine? That was one question I had, is how can we diminish that fear and increase that sense of ownership. I think we didn't use the word responsibility, but it is a part of it. If I belong, I am responsible for the health of that system, of that community. And so that's probably where we ended, was with seeking community. And so I would appreciate the team also adding to my paraphrase of our really, really great conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Can you hear me? I turn myself off. Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's a fair summary. But I would like to add to the community, because there's for me, a very special relationship for communities that is not just the people in it, but the where they are living. And Armand and I were discussing this as well, because indigenous people, tribal people, First Peoples, they lived in communities, but they lived very absolute closely with where they lived. It provided everything. So it was obvious, self-evident on a moment-to-moment basis that you looked after the community, you looked after the planet, you looked after where you lived. Okay, it wasn't a planet-wide thing, but just in that action locally, if every tribe was doing that, then the planet was automatically looked after, or the bigger system was. And I think we've become divorced. We've got people and environment. Someone just said, it's out there. It's not out there. It's actually in us as well. I mean, we are made up of eukaryotic cells, which have got symbionts inside us. We cannot live without our symbionts keeping us alive, digesting our food, helping us breathe, all of that stuff. But we have become somebody in our groups use the phrase, we move on too quickly. And that, for me, really rang a big loud bell, because that's exactly, nobody engages. It's difficult to get people to engage with an idea long enough to think through. People say, yeah, but, rather than yes, and tell me some more. Okay. So the confrontational aspect of people putting out ideas is one you're likely to get, rather than an engagement with an idea and then exploring it in further detail. And the social media obviously has a lot to do with that. But also, I think the way that capitalism, for example, is organized, is designed, is that you want to sell your product, and you want to sell your product to as many people as you can. And in selling that product, you've got to somehow package it in a way that they want it. So that's not to do with the common good, and that's not to do with the environment. That's to do with being laser focused on, this individual thing. And that, to me, that's really the tragedy where we are as a species, is that we've lost that commitment to a community which belongs somewhere, where all the people in the community give something, what they can, to keeping that balance with where they live. And if we use that as a template, so we put the environment in the community, then we've got a chance of maybe developing an approach which can work. But so I just wanted to add, the environment is the community. Okay, and the community are the environment. They're not separate.
Can I just pick up something that Kathleen said, I think it was, no, Kate, about learned helplessness in organizations. A sense that, what can I do? Even funnily enough, I've come across CEOs who have expressed that learned helplessness. What can I do? I've got to deliver the profits, whatever. My original question referred to the development of emotional and spiritual maturity. And I think that's something that we can all do for ourselves. And as teachers, I think that it's crucial that we teach the next generation what that actually looks like. For me, okay, I don't know if everyone will have a different kind of answer, but spiritual maturity means understanding where one's ego needs, one's ego drives, and learning to, if you like, manage those ego drives and to transcend them in certain circumstances. And emotional maturity is really understanding what we've been talking about, which is defensiveness and fear, and how we react when there is lack of security, lack of safety, lack of resources. And, you know, Kate, when you talked about learned helplessness, I've come across this so many times in organizations. What often that is rooted in is it's rooted in a fear of challenging the existing systems and processes in organizations. People know what's right to do, but they fear doing it. And what they fear is what's holding them back is their own ego needs. You know, I'll be sacked, I'll be criticized, I'll be sidelined, I'll be this, I'll be that. And I wrote this book called Leading with Love, and the people who I interviewed there, they displayed such courage in challenging the systems. They were prepared to face the consequences. They were prepared to be sacked. That's the kind of leader we need in our organization. And that's the kind of thing that we can do in terms of helping to cultivate that courage, that self-belief, that conviction, that compassion in the next generation of leaders, it seems to me.
Can I just add to that as well? Yeah, this idea of fear. One thing that came up in our group was about this idea of learning to live with the unknown, an unknown future, and that is that kind of letting go of control, of feeling that we should somehow be in control, and if we're not, we're doing it wrong, is really, really important in this transformation that we're going through right now. And the other thing is to learn to live with discomfort. So just, you know, building on what Karen said, there is a huge amount of discomfort involved in being a human being. And we seem to have been sold this idea that somehow if we're uncomfortable, that we're doing it wrong. Actually, it is just a natural part of being a living being that there will be some discomfort, and there will certainly be discomfort if you move to the edges. So we see this richness of an edge effect in living ecosystems, and we have it ourselves within our own personal growth and comfort zones, etc. That it involves some discomfort, but it's got huge potential then for unleashing this creativity and these this coming together. You don't have any kind of collaboration with somebody else unless you create an edge between you. And so learning to be comfortable with discomfort, and also having in place, and I think this is really important, the support networks to help us manage that discomfort is going to be a really, really vital part of how we move towards this more courageous way of being, for leaders and for absolutely everyone, as we move through really, really challenging times.
Yeah, I would add a piece that we somehow, as is at the end of our conversation, but there is still the concept, not the concept, the positionality around power that we need to speak it to, in terms of, yes, we can own our work, we can own what we can do and be really scaled to our regions and within our influence. Yet, if we really think about what are the levers for change, if those that are, in the 1%, 2%, have the agency to redistribute power, redistribute resources, create the mandates for change in organizations and institutions, actually it tips off the change that we need. So there is still also the question of how can we bring people in power, or those that are in positions of power and privilege, getting into gear in terms of owning their responsibility in all of this, because they have the they have the greater leverage in how we can shift things in the scale and in the urgency that we need right now. And so, and looking at the time that we have now just 15 minutes left. John, I don't know how we would be cultivating the other topics for future crucial conversations. I know we might probably send out some what's this evaluation feedback forms to harvest what are your thoughts on what other crucial conversations that we can have for the coming year. But this exploration has really been so rich and so deep. John?
Well, sure, and I'm really jealous that I couldn't be in one of the breakout rooms today. Thank you for everyone that participated in that. But to Lana's point, we are, I think, going to be drawing some inspiration, obviously, from the 3 conversations that took place over the last 6 weeks or so. We also have the GRLI's AGM coming up on the 4th of December. Now, in most organizations, you will know that as the annual general meeting. Of course, we've repurposed it somewhat as the all-gathering momentum opportunity for our partners and associates to connect and consider not only what's happened this year, but also what pathways we explore next year. So I would not be surprised if, based on the last 3 conversations and our meeting early December, there will be a number of new refined questions emerging for us to look at in the upcoming crucial conversations next year. But of course, everyone who's here today are more than welcome to provide feedback. I'm particularly interested and curious to hear about the slightly different format that we've taken today, because at least from my perspective, it seems like it holds some potential. But maybe we can just hold some time now, if that's okay, Lana, just to hear whether there are any suggestions either around where this conversation needs to go, further questions that needs to perhaps feature, voices that needs to be included that are not being heard, and please do bring them. And also any thoughts on the way in which this was held today. So that would be wonderful. And feel free to pop when you're hot if anyone has anything to add to that.
I just, yeah, I feel like we voiced Armand's question about white supremacy. I'm not sure we've quite done it justice. And we've been here before, so in previous courageous conversations we talked about decolonization and decolonizing the business school, but there's something about it, and the way that Armand talked about generations and how we try and move on too quick without processing everything that is at stake here. So I mean I wonder whether there's more here in that, because it strikes me that it's not just a domestic question, it's not just a political question, it's at the heart of the global system is empire, so I kind of feel it's, yeah, but that's just me.
Maybe Chris, just to add, and not to delve into to intellectualizing it, right? And I've been in many decol conversations, but I'm just wondering what's this invisible hand and what's holding it, and how does it manage to just continuously be there? And so there's a large presence, then there's a dwindling presence, but it's ever present. So maybe, yeah, and do we move too quickly? Do we? I like the way Peter framed it, right? And I see it in my kids too. They want think to know the end of the story before it is that they've actually read the story. The joy is in the reading, right? It's in the journey. So there's lots for us to ask of ourselves.
Maybe to complement briefly on that, Armand, I think it again comes in certain ways back to kind of the narratives and the stories, because this invisible hand and what we potentially do with it and how we perceive it is again a simple simulation of our brain, like everything else around us. So if there are people that were a little bit more interested in neuroscience, like I was in the last couple of years, I've read so many different research and books where there was a very interesting point which kind of challenged my whole perception of how I see the world, was that everything that we see, feel, and sense around us is pure projections of our brain and what we've learned, either consciously or subconsciously as humans, since we have been in the wombs and since we have been born. So I feel like it's also a little bit of a play in our own brains of how we perceive the hand, if it's actually kind of potentially going towards us, or if it's something that we can use as a tool to empower others. And something that I was just now thinking about, when there was at some point in the room a question of, again, where is where is the power that we are personally holding? Where is the personal power, personal potential for power? Something that kind of came to my mind is that there is so much power in this room, and in particularly to the people that are practitioners, teachers, deans of any sorts, that are actually the ones that are transmitting the learning. So there is so much power in the fact that you have potentially a class or a few people that you're coaching, or simply maybe children, grandchildren, or whatsoever, that you give so much power when transmitting the knowledge of any kind and any sort. So that's, from my perspective, a great reminder for people that are in the space or in the role of teaching, that they hold such a strong role in the society, which has been changed a lot in the last couple of even centuries. And the last thing that I wanted to question is how we potentially tap into that personal power, and in the fact that the transfer of knowledge is such a powerful tool to actually play with the perception of this empowering hand, that, or invisible hand, that Armand was talking about. How can we potentially give it a different meaning, or give it different power, if that makes sense? Or maybe that was too untangible, I don't know, but I played in my own mind with a few thoughts that was also quite evidenced by neuroscience, and the fact that it's quite a lot in our brains, and there is kind of a lot of power of simple change in perception.
Peter, you had your
a couple of things I wanted to jump in on. John, you wrote, and sorry, not John, Chris, you wrote the stories we tell, that we are told, and so on. We can be inspiring, and I possibly you've gathered that I have a particular, not me personally, not my story, but there is a story, just like Harry was talking about her neuroscience stuff. I have a science story which guides the way I look at the problem. I just wanted to ask, I asked this in the breakout room, how many of you, or if any at all, have come across the scientific work of the microbiologist Lynn Margulis and the atmospheric chemist, British guy, James Lovelock? Have any of you come across that? Okay. That work, which is about the evolution on the planet over 3,600 million years, does for me provide some kind of explanations for where we are now. And it's a very powerful story. And if you haven't come across it, I advise, if you could humbly suggest you might just read one book called The Symbiotic Planet by Lynn Margulis, because she touches on all aspects of it. What that story, they call it Gaia science, but that's a bit of an unfortunate name because that's attracted all sorts of diversions and rabbit holes which are not necessary. But what that story for me shows is that we're actually living in two different realities at the same time. Okay, and I'm not the first to say this. Yuval Noah Harari, the historian, makes the same point, but from a different angle as a historian. But there is this reality of the way nature works. Okay, and then there's this extra reality that we've created with our imaginations, with our brains. So if I just give you one example, we have to breathe. We breathe, and that's a real reality. We can't escape that. And climate change is a real reality. It's really happening with real systems. We can't change our thinking and make climate change go away. But then beyond that, if you think about something like nation states, this is Harari's point, we invented them. We invented America. We invented these lines on a map, which don't exist on the real planet with the rest of the nature. All of the, no bee, for example, flies along until it comes to the border and doesn't go across the border. So see, all the rest of nature does it where it does it, and does it very, very well. And this is a lot to do with Sarah's stuff on forests. And there are, just on the hierarchies thing, there is no hierarchy. There's no value judgment in nature. In nature, not one organism is better than another. It's different, and it has a part to play in the global system. So to me, the key is to find these two realities, separate them so we can see what we're talking about. Are we talking about something we invented, like American politics, or are we talking about climate change, which is real, which is CO2, which is physics, it's science. We can look at the science and we can see what we can do about it, because the science has got some nice clues. Communities of bacteria have run the planet. It's a big story, and they're still running the planet. Communities of bacteria, they're in us. They provide everything we need because they're the photosynthesizers, are basically the blue-green algae which started it all. Their cells are now in green plants, but it's the same cells, it's the same bacteria. That's for me, the narrative which makes sense. But you've got to keep the two worlds separate. Otherwise, you can find yourself going down oh yeah, we're worried about this, but no, actually, what's the natural explanation for what's going on here? Did we invent that? Is that a made-up problem, or is that a real-life problem? So that's my area. I just want to know if any of you come across Gaia. And I noticed John, Chris put your hand up, and so did Daria. How many other people come across Lovelock and Margulis? I can't see all the pictures, so I can't see how many people.
Michaela's got it in her
Michaela.
And John has too. I think we're kind of just about out of time now. Lana, were you going to close things off? Or?
Well, I would just like for us to close off with reactions around gratitude. Gratitude for the 3 conversations that we've had for the past few months, and gratitude to all the people that have joined the session. So all of you have been here, and gratitude also to John, Daria, and Chris, and myself, who have been holding this space along with you. So I would love for you to unmute yourselves, and in your language, in the ways that you would want to express, just for all of us to say thank you for being here. So maraming salamat.
Paalam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dank het was lekker om jullie te hê.
Stort tack till er alla.
Die twee van ons wat met mekaar gaan gesels.
Ja, Armand, dankie Armand vir jou tyd, waardeer dit.
Ja.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks for joining.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sarah, for
Thanks for
sharing.
joining,
Much
everybody.
appreciated.
Bye.
Thank you,
Oh,
Karen.
thank
Thanks.
you. Yeah,
Bye.
thanks
Cheers.
for
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Pedagogies of Collapse. Thanks, Mary, for sharing that. I haven't seen that.
What was that?
The author is Ginny Miklos Savant, or Savant Miklos, who's at Rotterdam. And she's got a game that goes with it called Pedagogies of called Collapse, which is about to be released. The book and the game are both going to be free, open source. But she's developed a new program at Rotterdam called something about leading societal transitions. It's all about societal transitions. And she's been looking at the work of the real science, as Peter said, but also the social overlays. So the book and the game are interesting.
Oh, great. What's that called?
Okay, good.
I missed the name of that.
Pedagogies of Collapse. I put the link in the
It's
chat.
on the chat.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, I figured if I put it in the chat, it'd make it to the notes. Is that how it works, John?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll
Because resources are really great. I appreciate people putting things
we'll
in.
save the chat.
Yeah.
We'll save the chat and circulate
Thanks
it.
a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stort tack till alla.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep. See you. Bye.
All right.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, I'm going to check out that Pedagogies of Collapse. From a living systems approach, this period of turbulence happens often before this systemic shift. So that didn't really come out much today, but it's might be a topic for a conversation. To what extent do people believe that is happening now, and therefore should therefore have some kind of hope for systemic shift in a to a more healthy future?
Yeah. Who wrote the Civilization book, which said that the civilizations that collapsed, when they're nearing collapse, they don't suddenly change their ways. They do more of the same. And I think that's what we're seeing now in terms of the human civilizations. So certainly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's, by the way, because it was mentioned quite a bit at the beginning of the call, but I think that's why Trump is most likely getting re-elected.
Yeah,
because
it's an example.
The conditions that created his election in the first round hasn't gone away, and quite frankly, Harris doesn't necessarily offer anything different, fundamentally different, that is going to change the system. So
that's right.
So it's.
And that's what's interesting about this real and fictional realities idea, is that if you look at it from a political point of view, both Democrats and the Republicans are fictional realities. They're not to do it. So they're just stories that are vying against each other, but they actually don't have any root in things like, what we're pumping into the atmosphere, CO2. They don't have any real kind of impact on that at all. And that's the kind of scary bit, but that's
we've been round the collapse loop once, haven't we? And we've been round the kind of regenerative kind of, well, maybe even twice we went round regenerative.
Yeah, we have. So
I don't
Peter,
know.
you'll be able to access all the recordings of our conversations going back about 4 years now on these topics. I'll send them on to you.
Yeah, it's not a reason not to go around it again, but maybe we
absolutely
find a different way to go around it somehow, because it is still live, for sure. Interesting. Well, thank you, Sarah and Karen, for your
thank you. Actually,
Thank you.
Lots of
very
food
rich
for thought.
conversation at the top. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lovely. And I thought that the format worked very well. I would have loved to have probably about twice the amount of time, to be honest with you. I would have loved to have met all the other people that I didn't meet in my class.
we could keep going for another couple of hours, I think.
Yeah, we could have done easily.
It's so valuable to be, talking about these big questions. There's, there's precious few kind of forums for those big questions that might provoke that really big shift in thinking that we need.
It's an interesting balance between kind of getting enough people in the room that you can have the conversation, but keeping it short enough that people are prepared to sign up.
Yeah, no,
So
I
we
get
found that 90 minutes is kind of a sweet spot that, you know, some people are prepared to commit to. What we probably do need to think about is how do we ensure that once conversations like these have taken place, that there's some sort of asynchronous or perhaps semi-permanent live environment where people can continue to check in and discuss. So perhaps what we can do is ensure that as we write up at least to the extent we can, the kind of the highlights from what's discussed here, that we do it again maybe on LinkedIn and invite the conversation starters to each kind of add their reflections since having taken part, so that we can keep that conversation going.
Sounds a great idea, John. Yeah, lovely idea. And the only thing I'd like to leave with is actually how do we take some of the insights and some of the ideas in this conversation, apply it to GRLI? How does I mean, I know this is an ongoing conversation that you have, but if GRLI was a political party, what would they do? What would their strategy be? How do they empower themselves and all of that? I mean, I know you have that ongoing conversation, but it's particularly germane, I think, when we're talking about power and societal transformation. So yes, thank you very much, and I will see you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I didn't get to copy and paste in the document, but we have the chat, right? So just
I saved the chat as well on this laptop.
So what